What's up? Chris is on mute still.
Oh, hi. Hello. Hi, everyone. We're back. I've been on Zoom for 15 weeks and I've still not figured out when to unmute myself. Welcome back to Wine School, the Wines of Provence edition. This is our second Rosé-focused wine school, and super excited to be back this week with a few new guests. We have with us Dane Burson and Tahira Habibi, two incredible professionals in the wine world who are very familiar with the wines of Provence and Rosé. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves so that I don't do any disservice as you introduce your many different skills, talents, and businesses. How about Tahira, you go.
Sure. Like you said, my name is Tahira. I'm the founder of Hue Society, and I'm also the founder and executive director of the Roots Fund nonprofit. I've been in the wine industry for about 12 years now. I've worked everywhere from luxury to craft wine, so I have a pretty well-rounded background, and I'm a geek under all of this. Yeah.
Good.
My name is Dane Burson. I'm the founder and CEO of L'Effective Rosé, which is a rosé wine also produced in Provence. I began my career in 2003 in the wine and spirits industry, mainly working at Moet Hennessy USA on various couple of different brands, from Belvedere Vodka to Mort de Chandon, Veuve and Dom Perignon. So I'm more of a champagne geek that fell in love with rosé.
All relevant and perfect for this discussion. Well, thank you guys for being here. We're really excited to chat. For everybody that's joining us again, hopefully a lot of you are back either from a previous wine school or specifically from last week's Wines of Provence wine school. But just to give you a little bit of a refresher on everything. So you will see a worksheet and a 6-pack of wine that you can buy both inside of this new platform, which if you know wine school well is probably pretty new to you, but we sort of upgraded our situation, and it should allow you to interact a little more seamlessly. Like I said, you can purchase the Wines of Provence 6-pack that we have through Parcel, which is Grant's great wine shop based in New York, but shipping all around the US. And then we also have a Q&A on the side there. So please drop in Q&A. We'll be answering in the chat, but we'll also at the end here take about 15 minutes or so and answer any questions that we feel are super relevant to the discussion. So just to tee everything up. So the Wines of Provence, who we're working with on this program specifically, is an organization that represents about 650 wineries and companies from the region of Provence in France, which is the home of Rosé. And we've partnered up with them to basically talk specifically about the 3 appellations in the Provence region, the Côte de Provence, Coteaux d'Aix-en-Provence, and Coteaux Verrois in Provence. So those we'll talk a little bit about, we did a little bit of this last week, but we'll tee up a little bit about the region so that we can cover that in case you missed last week. We'll talk a little bit about how rosé is made, just in case you missed that. And then basically what we're going to cover mostly though today is the fact that rosé is for every occasion, not just sitting on a beach with your feet in the sand. So I'm sure we'll have plenty to cover on all of those fronts. And we have 2 wines that were specifically picked out of the 6-pack today that we'll focus on as well. So why don't maybe Grant, do you want to tee up the 2 wines and what those are? And then we'll talk a little bit about the general stuff from, the appellations and then get into the how, when, and why you should be drinking this stuff.
Great. What's up? So 2 wines out of the 6-pack. So everything is from the larger Côte de Provence region. And today we have 2 wines from 2 different parts of it. One is from the Coteaux d'Aix-en-Provence, AIX, which you've probably seen on some labels. There's one brand that has it real bold. That's a part of Provence. And then there's the Coteaux in Verrois and Provence, which is another part of Provence. So just like a little zone within, the larger Provence region. The first one I think we should try is the Les Carrel, which is the one from the Verrois and Provence.
I'm going to share my screen just so you can see.
You got labels. Cool. Sweet.
Hold on, you get that might be the worksheet. Hold on, stand by. Hold on, let me make sure I got this open up and ready to go. Keep going, Grant, and I'll just pull
So the idea here between, you know, really when you're trying two different wines, you have to have something, you know, consistent between the two. I feel like in, I don't know, like early high school science class, you have the constant in any sort of experiment, right? And the idea with these two wines is that they're from the same vintage, which next week we'll really talk about rosé and the idea that like rosé can't age, because most often there's definitely like a drive to drink the most current release of the wine. And these are both from 2019, so that's constant between the two wines. And then they're from two different regions, but I think most importantly, they're from different blends of grapes. I think is really important to hit here. And that's a choice that each producer will make, which we hit a little bit on last week. Is there's grapes which have to be used, mostly red grapes and then some white grapes. And the producer can make the choice as to what the final blend of the wine is, right? And then both of these wines that are from two different parts of Provence, with the altitude, the exposure to the sun, the wind, all of, you know, that kind of minutia gets can affect the flavor of the wine. So the first wine, Les Carrel, which we threw up there, which is the easiest of the two to pronounce as well, I may add. That's made from three grapes, a grape called Cinsault, Grenache, which you probably heard of, and then Syrah, but it's mostly Cinsault, right? Boom. And you can see both these wines are made in the same way. There's a couple different ways that you can make rosé, but these are both made in the same way, so there's no, you know, funny business going on there. So the color of the wine is really just arrived from the different types of grapes that are blended into it. Other than Syrah, both Grenache and Cinsault produce wines that are lighter in color, a little bit fresher and kind of savory in flavor. And then the Syrah, which is a third of the blend here, gives the wine a little bit more like weight and a little bit of richness. But I'd say, I don't know how Tahira, how you feel about this wine, but I think it's definitely on the like crisp, kind of salty, savory
Yeah,
side.
definitely. There's a lot of saline. I remember, like, because you look at the color of the wine, you're like, oh, this is, you know, that's what always fools you about rosé, right? It's like the color, and so you think it's like this cute little thing you're going to sip on. And I sipped it, and I was like, oh, there's like a lot of saline in there, but you know, it's indicative of the region, and you know, it just made me want like seafood. So I think that it does its job for sure. And it is very light and crisp, and that is also from the Cinsault, which is, you know, the number one grape in the blends. So you're going to get a lot of that, and I think that it's good. It's not as fruit forward as I thought it was going to be. It's definitely more savory. In Provence, they call it garrigue. It's a term in Provence based on like the I don't go into a bunch of technical terms, but the land. So, you know, in Provence, they grow a lot of rosemary and lavender and thyme and stuff like that. And so that combination of herbs, they call it garrigue. So you get that a lot in a specific region. And it definitely comes through in this wine.
It's like the like spice mix you can,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah,
can buy.
it's like allspice. Yeah,
It's
garrigue is like allspice.
It's your grill rub that you marinate everything in. But yeah, totally. I always, you know, there's so many like idyllic photos of the area of like lavender fields and
Yeah.
fields. It's good living over there. Sweet. And then the next wine, as well. I don't know if we have anything hitting in the Q&A right now about how this wine tastes, but it's light and delicious. One thing
covered either way.
One thing to note, which is very important, is that if you have Provence on the label, the wine has to be dry, right? Which color can kind of mess with us on, you know, thinking that a wine's sweet. And there's this whole thing, like, I don't know, I guess I didn't really experience it because I haven't been drinking as long as everybody, but is um like the sweet rosé trend. But Danae, I'm curious how you've experienced that when you're out working with your wine. Is the idea of rosé always being sweet? People are really scared of sweet rosé now. But I will say that Provence rosé, if you have Provence on the label, you don't even have to ask. That means that you're dry. There's no sugar. It's not soda,
Yeah.
Zima like
I
stuff.
think, I think the styles that are made in America has kind of warped people's perceptions in the United States when it comes to Provence rosé. So there's a lot of confusion because some American rosés tend to be a lot sweeter because there aren't that strict standards that they have in Provence. So that leads way to, as soon as they see this richness of the color, they automatically assume it's going to be sweeter, because typically in the States, that's what you will get with the richer color rosé. So to your point, I think it's important that we, as Provence rosé, start telling people that by law we can't have more than a certain amount of grams per liter of sugar. So the color is just more about the maceration and the blend than it is so much about is it sweet or not. But with my rosé, I deal with that all the time. I walk in, it's definitely a darker, richer color. They automatically think it's going to be sweet. So it's something I deal with every day for sure.
I know we talk about this too, and just the idea, like describing wine as sweet or describing it as dry can be really tough, right? Because you can have like a dry wine that has sweet flavors to it,
Right.
and not be like a sweet dessert wine.
And
right?
the best thing to say is fruit forward, because I think that translates better than sweet. But so I think that's the way to kind of trick your mind a little bit. So it's fruit forward and not necessarily sweet, because we all think we hate sweet. We all started drinking sweet. So it just flashes us back to like college when you say something's sweet.
It's crazy how, I mean, you've seen like the trends in food too, and in, I mean, we're all scared of sugar now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And also, I think it's important to add that in the US, the climate's different. So you're going to have more developed sugar in the grapes because, the sun and all of that stuff, versus Europe. So that's also a major difference in the development of the acidity and sugar in the particular grape, because the sun is hitting it regularly. And not that the sun is not in Europe, but it's a lot hotter over here where, weather-wise during harvest and during that season.
Yeah, definitely. Right. So like the Les Corella is only 13% alcohol, which, you can like kind of fudge alcohol levels a little bit, but that's pretty low, for a totally dry wine nowadays with climate change. So if you see low alcohol in the wines, well, not too low alcohol. If it's too low, then you probably have some sugar. But if you see lower alcohol, that means you're going to get a more like crisp and kind of tart, refreshing wine if you want it in that style. And then once you start bumping up to like 14 plus, the wine will definitely have a richer, kind of denser, fruitier flavor out there. In rosé too, that's sort of like standard for white and red, but you can definitely feel the booze in rosé. I feel like when it gets out of whack, you're like, well,
yeah, for sure.
Well, that's one thing I thought was interesting as we were talking about just this region as well, is there's a lot of variation in the terrain and even the climate, across the Appalachians. And I think that's certainly, I think, part of why you get such great wines from this part of the world is, I mean, I have to imagine, the wines in Saint-Tropez are quite a bit different from some of the other wines up in the hills. Danae, do you want to talk a little bit about why you chose to make your wine there and just sort of talk a little bit about, how that all started?
I mean, yeah, for me, I've always loved rosé. And when I created this brand, it was very important for me to go to Provence because, as you said, Provence is the standard for rosé making worldwide. So it was important to have that heritage and that gravitas to the brand. As far as Saint-Tropez, I was very familiar with the wineries there from traveling there and visiting so much on holidays. So it was partly this nostalgia.
Good job, man. You must be really into rosé to leave the champagne Saint-Tropez life.
Listen, man, I took my work perks seriously. So yeah, I chose this winery, and I was very familiar with it because they were very involved in a lot of the social activities around the Cannes Film Festival, Leonardo DiCaprio's Foundation Gala. So the winery has been around since 1340, so they're a pretty established player, and they are the largest landowners, excuse me, in the on the peninsula. So they have this rich heritage that was super important to me. I didn't really, when I worked with them, I didn't just go with one of their state-grown brands they were already making. I really wanted to work with them on the cuvee because I knew what I liked in rosé. I didn't like the ones that were super light and super acidic, and I didn't like the ones that were big and bold and heavy. And that's just a matter of style. We all have different preferences and styles. So I wanted something that was far more medium body, easier to drink, but still very fruit forward, with long finish and low acidity. All very technical stuff. Sorry about that.
Oh, not at all. I think that's what's great about this stuff is I think it helps to, kind of dispel the idea that rosé is a one note kind of one situation wine, right? And that it actually can be, you can find a lot of differentiation, especially wines Provence, but within the category rosé, you can find a lot of differentiation. And I think that means that you can sort of use it for many different things and many different occasions. Cool.
For sure. There's a rosé for everyone out there. Again, it's a matter of style. I used to use this in our champagne world. No champagne is bad. It's just a matter of the style you like. And it's the same thing applies in rosé. So it's, unless it's just complete trash, but none of them are bad. It's just a matter of what you're into at that particular time. And to your point, some are better with food, some are better for aperitif. It's just a matter of the mood and the setting and everything that you're in at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So Tahera, as a sommelier, how do you think about, when you think about rosé and situations outside of the typical, feet in the sand, how do you think about when you might be able to use, the different expressions of the wine and what might be appropriate in different times?
Obviously we're talking about place. So if we're talking about Provence, I'm always thinking about food because, they create such great high acid wines and you need acid for food. That's the matching point. So that's always important. And then, look at the grapes. I would say between these two rosés, and I don't want to jump ahead because we haven't gotten to the second. These two rosés, we haven't gotten to the second one yet, but they're definitely different in style. And this first one is a lot more lean than the next one is going to be. And for me, they both go with food, but they both call to different kind of foods for me. So, the leaner style is more of a aperitif, like salad, lighter fare, seafood, not necessarily on the beach with your feet in the sand, but more so like out and on a patio, eating and enjoying life and swirling your glass as you do. And, I'll go into the other style when we get to it, but it's definitely a matter of how the wines are made and what they're made, what grapes are used to make them. And I'll go into that a little bit more when we get to the other wine, because there's definitely a difference.
Well, why don't we do that now? It's a perfect segue. I think that's a great way to kind of transition into the second wine and, what the differences are and why. Grant, you want to tee that one up?
Sure. Yeah. So the second one, Chris, I don't know if you want to throw the.
Yep, I'll put the screen back up. Hold on.
Bottle shot, but there we go. So La Chapelle de Soyer. I had to practice that. So that's a blend. It's a blend of Grenache. It's a blend of a white grape roll, Syrah, Cinsault, Grenache Blanc, and then the one that I think Tahera was noting that can really change the wine is that there's actually Cabernet Sauvignon in this too, which is 25% of the blend, right? Wow. And that's Cabernet is like kind of a sneaky grape. I think very rarely do you see. You see, of course, in Bordeaux, you can see Cabernet Sauvignon like as its own variety, right? It's the dominant variety in like a lot of Bordeaux wines and a lot of California wines too, but especially in certain parts of southern France and in certain parts of Italy, like in Tuscany a lot, people throw it in there to give the wine more body and more richness to it, just because it has all of that power to it. And that's why people love to drink it on its own as like a cab or as a Bordeaux, right? It's because the wine is smoky, it's earthy, it's big, and juicy, and putting, that into the wine can definitely, change the flavor and the richness without necessarily even affecting the alcohol, but really can take the wine. And I think that's part of what's so special about Provence is you have so many independent producers that have their own recipe and their own thing, across the board here. And one of the reasons why we wanted to show this producer was a style of rosé that is, a little bit more full-bodied and a little bit just kind of juicier and richer, while still being dry and I think also still being refreshing, but has a little bit more power to it, as well. So that's La Chapelle du Soyer, and that's the one from the Coteaux d'Aix in Provence, which is another like sub-region of the Côte de Provence.
Yeah, and this is this is a really interesting wine to me because it has so many grapes in it, and for the most part, it's broken up into quarters. So you have 25% Cab, you have 25% Grenache, you have 25% Roll, which Roll is another word for Vermentino, which is an Italian grape. And so you're getting this acidity, this other kind of acidity in there, and it's like a lot of fruit, but it's paired very well with the body of the Cab. And so interesting. And also there's Grenache Blanc in there, which is also a very like round grape, as far as like style and body. And so the wine has this nice roundness to it, but it has the longest finish ever. And that is a very big indicator of a quality wine, the finish. Yeah. I sip this wine. I know if you guys noticed the last time I sipped this wine, I can still taste it. Finish is forever. That is great for sipping, but incredible for food as well, because it just continuously cleanses your palate. So you don't have to keep sipping and eating, sipping and eating. You can sip, take a couple bites, and then, sip some more because the finish is that long. And so, like I said, I think these wines, as far as style, are very different. And you can even look at the picture and you can see where that Cab came into play. It's just literally just like, boom, I'm here. What's up? What we doing? What we eating? But it's also a really good sipping wine. And I think another thing to note about the La Chapelle is that it's from a very high elevation. Yeah. And so going back to that finish, the elevation being up that high, the berries are smaller, but it also gives the wine a longer time to develop its acidity and, to kind of live on the vines versus developing very fast and too rapid so that you have to pull them. And the grapes, the sugar is overdeveloped. Like this is very even, very well developed wine. And it's from 30-year vines. So the significance of that is that's also part of the richness. Right, you have very old vines that are working very hard to develop to produce these grapes. And so when you have that, and you have the combination of old vines working hard, you have the combination of very high elevation, and then you have all of these mixtures, and it's like a perfect mixture, I'm telling you, of grapes, which is dangerous sometimes, because if you don't get the right percentage in there with the grapes, it could go left very fast. But I think that they did this perfectly, and it's so well balanced, but it's still very rich and fruit forward, as opposed to, the Lascarel was a little bit more lean and acidic driven. So
what's interesting as well with this is that Grenache tends to be a higher alcoholic percentage grape, and they have Grenache Blanc and Grenache in it, but the Roll actually tones down some of the alcohol from the Grenache to give it a much more balanced and even kill finish, which I like a lot.
Yeah. How might that change year to year, just based on the way the grapes might change? I mean, do they have to tinker with these wines to get the balance right based on the percentages?
Yeah, typically year to year, vintage will have a different percentage of grapes in it. I mean, it's very hard. It wouldn't be the same wine every year if you just stuck to strict breakdowns of each different group. They'll tinker with it to kind of make sure it's still in line with their profile.
Sure.
Yeah, you see that it's like it's actually Donna, that's a thing you see in Champagne too, right?
Yeah.
It's like how at the end of the day, I don't really know anywhere else that I don't sure there's other parts of like southern France ultimately to where and in Bordeaux too, but I think really in Champagne and really in this part of the world is where they take that idea of like the blend
Yeah.
really seriously, so that every year if you're drinking, Lafette or Les Carrel and that's your wine and that's, your go-to, what you're getting, so that like next year Les Carrel isn't this like big Cabernet heavy, rich wine. If you're more into the really crisp kind of bright and salty wines that,
Absolutely. Yeah,
that's
they're very style driven, as I said earlier. Like this is our style, this is our blend. And to your point, it's very important to make sure the consumer has that same experience and they understand that. So they really work hard, both in Provence and in Champagne, to give that consumer their style of wine consistently.
Sure.
Definitely. No, it's cool. That's definitely like a, I don't know. There's this whole thing of like natural wine, right? Which there's some good stuff out there.
Yeah.
Chris is like rolling his eyes because
I'm ready. This is my favorite part of wine school.
I know we've done a bunch of these things, and I have like I don't know, a common theme of either hating on like giant brands or like whatever natural wine. But by the way, like we're into it. But the idea is that like there has to be some intention into this in order for there to be a great product, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And it's good that people are like paying attention to the end result. It's not just this like throw it up in the air romantic thing. The grapes are like out there and we just happen to pick them at the right time. Magic, and that's fine, right? And so I think that's where it is important to recognize there's so much that even if it's the thing about rosé, and that's part of the reason why we're like, let's try to talk about it in a way that it's like it's also a wine, right? It's not just a drink. It can just be a drink, but there is like, especially in this part of the world, there's so much history and so much intention that goes into these producers and into how how they grow the grapes, the blend of the grapes, the age of the vines, whereas I think rosé nowadays really has become, in so many other parts of the world. I was writing something about this Italian producer who I really love their red wines, and like the only thing I could really say about the rosé was like they kind of make this rosé just to like make rosé, right? Just because they're like, cool, we're gonna sell it and we're just gonna make it.
It's a trend. Let's go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, it works, and that is such a different thing than what all these producers are doing in Provence, that I think adds such a layer to this part of the world, that like this is the zone where rosé is taken seriously, even if you're you are like one of the lucky few who have their feet in the sand and right now.
Well,
especially right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's one thing that, because we get asked this a lot. We got asked it yesterday even, which is sort of like, well, what producers from Provence do I look for? And there's so many, right? But you can really, just by starting with making sure that as you're looking around, you're looking for rosés made in Provence. It really does start to, I think, impart just like some confidence that you find a quality wine that was made with intention and and with passion. And that's, I think, what everybody is ultimately looking for when especially as people that get into wine, right? Like it's funny because we do talk about the natural wine thing as it relates to this, that so much of, I think, what brings people into wine is this like idea of storytelling about, the people that are making the wine, and that it's some multi-generation family that's been doing it for a really long time. And, there are these beautiful places in the world. And certainly these wines tick all those boxes. So it's a good way to just sort of know what you're getting.
Yeah, and even with the natural wine trend, listen, I get it. I understand we're all very health conscious, and it's not like any of these producers and vineyards are just bastardizing and destroying the earth. I think if anything, they're probably more diligent in what they do than most people actually understand and think. I tell everyone, they're like, oh, I want to go visit your vineyard. I'm like, prepare yourself, because it's a farm. It's not like, it's not this elaborate, beautiful thing. I mean, yes, it's beautiful in terms of the way it looks naturally, but it's not this machine. It's not this big song and dance theater sort of operation. It's literally a farm, and these guys are farmers, and they're very cognizant of producing the wine as best possible without outside intervention.
Yeah, totally.
I think
Well,
both producers are organic too. Just
Correct.
Yeah.
and they make a lot of wine, and
Yeah.
like on a a lot of they cover a lot of land, which is you can do that and have it be organic and still well made, which is
Yep.
great.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about occasions, right? Because that's one thing I think we wanted to cover for sure in this session is the fact that, rosé actually is great for a lot of occasions. And I think, even had a question about it, like what's your favorite occasion for rosé? And I think obviously we know that people go to that sort of vacation, summertime vibe, but, and I'd love to kind of hear from each of you. But I think for me, I think what's so great about it is that rosé is like, to me, like an ideal wine to bring to someone's house or to a party or something. Cause I don't know anybody that doesn't like it or enjoy it, and it can kind of be a crowd pleaser. And I think that's tends to be when I reach for it, even in the depths of winter.
Yeah.
But I'd love to know how else, we talked a little bit about, obviously rosé at the dinner table, and we'll get into more of that next week, but would love to sort of just hear from everybody else in terms of like, what are some other times in which you think about rosé as being appropriate?
I happen to love rosé at Thanksgiving. I know we're not talking about dinner, but I love rosé at Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving's the whole vibe.
Because it covers the entire spectrum, right? Like usually at Thanksgiving, you're eating a lot of seasonings. You have a lot of fatty foods. So, the acid is breaking down the fat. You have the spectrum of just different meals coming in. And rosé is great because you can insert it wherever you need to. So if you need to have one, in the beginning of the meal, you need to have one in the main course, and then there's even some styles that, depending on what you're eating for dessert, you can have that too. But particularly Provence rosé, I think is great at Thanksgiving. I always bring it, magnums, because it's just perfect. It's not going to upset anybody, like you said. And, it's kind of just like the, again, go back to like the garrigue or just like the natural herbaceousness of it just goes so well with the food at Thanksgiving. It's perfect.
We got to figure out this whole virus thing by Thanksgiving because
absolutely,
right?
It's gonna be trouble, man.
Thanksgiving on Zoom is not gonna do it for us.
I got to cook my own food. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna
work. There's this thing, right? And I've been asked to like, what are your favorite wines around Thanksgiving? And I love that you said that because it's such a hard thing to pair for, right? And there's like, I feel like, in the industry we have like our like go-tos, but rosé makes so much sense. Yeah, it's good, and it's nice to have something that's like lighthearted and has positive energy. At Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, my family could go in a lot of different directions.
Calm the arguments down. Here's some rosé. Like rosé makes everybody happy. You can't who's angry with a glass of rosé in their hand? Really think about that.
You really suck if in a bad mood.
But to Chris's point, for me, I think it is the great equalizer, the great communion wine, so to speak. Not making it a religious thing by any means, but I always think about when large groups of friends are together, rosé is usually the only drink we can all agree on out the gate. And for me, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to create it, was for that reason, because it literally does bring everyone together. For me personally, I like spicy Thai and Asian food with rosé. And then on the other spectrum, I get lazy and it's about pizza and French fries. So I run the gamut of what to go with. You know me, Tahira.
This one and the French fries every Friday. French fries and rosé.
Fridays, baby. Rosé and French fries. Let's go.
I was going to say, I think you just summed up the entirety of my diet. So
I had French fries for lunch.
I do want to piggyback off of something Dane said. He said not to make it religious, but I think that we missed that part, that wine is religious. When the Romans and the Greeks abandoned the land, the monks are the ones for years who kept the wine, the vineyards going. So we can't say not to make it religious because it's rooted there.
That's a good point. Yeah, it is true. It's true too, because I think even beyond that, to me, I think what pulls people into wine so much is also just the shared experience part of it, right? Like you mentioned, Tahira, bringing a Magnum to Thanksgiving, and like I love large format bottles for that reason, right? Because you're just sharing with a ton of people, and that's what it's all about. So that's another, I think, thing to think about when you're showing up at a party. A Magnum of rosé from Provence is never going to be frowned upon.
Never.
And Grant, you guys, you guys obviously sell a lot of this stuff at Parcel, and I'm guessing you must be selling it year round for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I will say, I remember, I don't know, it's probably like 3 years ago. I on the patio at Charlie Bird, I remember we sold 150 cases of rosé, and I was like, wow, I feel like powerful. That is, it blew my mind, and I'll never forget. There was one table of like 3 people, and I remember they spent I think they spent $100, whatever it was, but like they had apparently, and I was like, are you guys sure? And the waiter they had like the equivalent of 10 glasses each of rosé, and I was like, guys, like we definitely messed their check up, but they went kind of coast to coast from lunch to dinner hanging out on the patio there. And that, for so much of like the decisions that we made was like, okay, cool, it's the summer wine, it's on the patio, people are like just going to drink it literally all day long, and that's its purpose. And then you start, I think both as like food got a little bit more creative, or also like all of you who are listening out there, people in America started to get just more curious about different wines in the world, is that our whole, as sommeliers, and I think Tahira, has a similar experience, I hope, is like our whole Rolodex opened up once everybody was like, cool, we're open to having different things, right? And you started to see like wines by the glass. You'd be able to have something that wasn't just the like Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay, Burgundy, rundown for white wine, and then Pinot, Cab, Malbec, whatever, to where you're able to be more flexible within it. And I think that's where certain types of rosés, it has to be the right one, but where certain ones really do make sense in cold weather, or in more of like a food pairing or kind of a restaurant setting, right? And that's not to say that like my consumption definitely goes up when it's hot outside, and it's nice out, but the I think especially recently people have started to pay more attention to it. And we've seen in the wintertime, I think at Legacy we always had some rosé on by the glass, and it's like a relatively like theater district midtown restaurant, and with like I think a delicious but pretty like straightforward food menu. And that wasn't just because people were like dreaming of Saint-Tropez in February and 38th Street in New York City, but it made sense too, and yeah, I think especially like the second wine, that's a wine that you can, if you're geeking out and like trying to do food pairings, or if you sort of on the fence of what you want to drink, the wines are nuanced, and like there's enough to be said about some of these wines than like literally bury them in ice or throw them over ice and just crush it because it's hot outside and you're just trying to have a drink. So
I think the big guys who we appreciate because they open up the category and they bring people into the category have done a very good job of switching the narrative now to talk about après ski and being in the cabin and being in the woods, because you need to see that visual as Americans, because for so long the Europeans and the French were drinking rosé and Courchevel or Saint Moritz or whatever. And I think it's so I'm so happy to see when the big guys are now showing like, oh, they were drinking rosé in Aspen in the middle of February, because people need to see that to really say, oh, I guess I can drink it in the wintertime. So it's, whether it be Thanksgiving and Christmas, the more we promote as a category of no seasonality, will help everyone out. Because I think a lot of it is stigma. And to your point, Grant, it's like, oh, I had it in Saint-Tropez on the beach, I want that feeling. But if we can give them the same feeling of enjoying it in the wintertime, snuggled up at a fireplace with your significant other, we'll do ourselves justice as well.
But I also think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tara.
No, I was going to say, like, wine is also very psychological, and we need to think about it from that perspective as well, because you should keep a rosé on your list year round, and because it's very inviting. So if you have beginner drinkers that are coming in, they're going to look for a rosé section because it's pink. And even though it may be pink and it might taste like Darth Vader, they'll at least still trying it. You know, it's not always the pinky pink in the bottle. But it is psychological. And so to have some things on the menu, or, you know, things that even make sense with your food is incredibly important as well. You know, I always made my list, my restaurant list, my wine list based on the cuisine in the restaurant. If it made sense, it was going on the list. I didn't care what type of year, you know, what time of year it was. And, you know, right now we have 57 million cases of rosé coming in from Provence to the US every year, right? And so you have to think about the fact that that's not just in the summer. So if we stop pushing the narrative of summer rosé, then people will stop following the narrative of summer rosé. You know, we kind of lead those discussions, and especially for beginner drinkers, we're the ones who are going to direct them into what is going to be helpful, you know, what you should or should not be drinking, and all those kinds of things. So I think we need to focus a lot more on the psychology as well.
Totally. I think what you're getting at too, even it applies to so much more. I mean, I've always felt like this, that I think a lot of times as people are learning about wine, they almost need permission to break out of the rules. Right. And it's sort of like, it starts with, well, I can't drink this with this kind of food. And then I think that expands all the way into when you drink white wine or red wine or rosé. And it's such a good point that once you allow people to, you know, drink it or see other people drinking it at après-ski or, you know, being taken seriously in December on a restaurant menu, I think it allows people to experiment more and to sort of open up and be just like happy drinking what they like whenever they want,
right?
Which is cool. One thing that came up, and I think this relates to, it's a good question, and I think it relates to even like how you might think about, you know, bringing someone a bottle of rosé is, Grant, you mentioned it a little bit, you know, aging rosé. And it's not very common, but there was a question about it. And so do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, for any of you that have either had experience with it or just maybe have some insight in terms of, you know, you don't see, you know, old vintages of rosé floating around, probably for a lot of reasons, but I think there's always curiosity about vintages, and then also like how much does vintage matter when it comes to rosé, and then how long can you keep a bottle, or should you keep a bottle in your cellar?
Yeah. I mean, you know, Dane literally has his hands in the grapes more than I do, but I think the thing that I find is that what happens with any wine, right? And I was talking to somebody yesterday who we were talking about white wine and white wine's aging and white Burgundy aging, right? And we were like going there and talking about how there's this period of in Burgundy in like the 80s and 90s for white wines, to where the wines are really early 90s and 80s to where the wines are like white wines are super fresh. And then there's this period to where the wines have aged like rapidly, right? And that's kind of happening now. Nobody really knows what's going on, but the flavor of those wines changes, and it's not something that you like want to drink, right? And in white wine, it can be really clear as to what, when the wine is like old and aged too much. But I think with white wine and also with rosé is that, you know, red wine, we have this idea that it like everybody thinks they're drinking it too young, right? All the time. But I think the idea of aging a wine is all that, yes, there is a point to where the wine has like aged too much. But with rosé in particular is that, you know, there's a handful of producers that I think need an extra couple of years, you know, for those wines to really like to be maybe the best version of themselves, to where like the flavors become really interesting and they have the potential to age a lot. But what happens is you just simply is like, as wine ages, it becomes less fruity, right? It becomes less of the like thing that you want to just like drink and crush when it's hot outside. And that's not to say that the wines like spoil or they go bad, is that they just change a little bit. But there's no other wine than Rosé that people like obsess over drinking it really quick because it has that like fruity kind of fresh thing to it, which I totally understand. And there's definitely some that like that's what you want, and you want to preserve that like crisp freshness to it. But there's others, and I think especially next week, we're trying one that's like from 2017. Wow. That the Clos Cibon, the from Tiburon, that is like, it's a pretty geeky wine. When I threw it out there for the Côte de Provence, well, they were like, all right, like, are you sure about that? I'm like, yeah, you got to like, you got to put it out there that this is like a wine that has, you know, if you buy it and you forget about it, you know, it's not going to kill you. But I would say that what happens with Rosé as it ages, especially of the quality that like Provence Rosé, you know, I've moved on to Donné's wines. It's not just a plug. You can't see it because my background.
I got you. Don't you worry about it. There you go.
Which is also from Provence, is like a wine like this that has like, when you taste it, has body and it has concentration to it. A year out, the wine is still, it's going to have a lot going on to it. And, you know, if you buy some and you forget about a couple bottles, then the next year it might evolve into something that's a little bit more interesting. But I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said about waiting a year, you know, especially if the wine is like of a certain quality, then you can get away with it. If it's like really just
Rosé water,
wine, like, yeah, you're fine to like to drink it quick. But we used to have to make decisions, like on the wine list, we'd get called out. People would be like, oh, that wine is a year old, you're selling it just because
you're trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, you're trying to get rid of it.
That's the expiration date.
Yeah, and there's definitely some, you know, versions of that happening out there in the world. If you're at a restaurant and you're like, oh, okay, it's a restaurant and they're selling like Rosé by the glass and it's a 2017, they're just trying to get rid of it, right?
Okay, sure.
They're just trying to get rid of it.
Part of that also started with the fact that when Rosé first really started taking off in the United States, it would sell out after the season. So it was more of like the business decision was like, all right, it's gone until the next vintage comes. So I think that's stuck in the psyche of the American consumer, not really understanding, of course, they're not in the business. They don't understand that the reason why you were on such a current vintage is because everything else had sold out so fast. So they had to wait until the next vintage was absolutely ready. And it was more of a business decision, necessarily a reflection of the quality of wine, why that happened like that.
Donna, you want to chat, let us know real quick about, not real quick, but just, I know we we're like on a stop clock here, but yeah, about Lafette and yeah, it's delicious, man.
Thanks,
man.
Yeah.
So Lafette de Rosé translates to
yeah.
Rosé party. And really, like I said earlier, I was in the south of France. We were all sitting around, friends from all different backgrounds. And one of the things that I noticed in the States primarily is that Rosé was promoted as this one-dimensional drink, seasonality, one type of consumer profile, which we all know who that is. And I just wanted to change that. And I wanted to kind of capture the essence of like my friend circle and everything in a wine, and Rosé was that wine that could do that. So I worked with the winery to launch this brand. We launched just last year. We've had a tremendous amount of success, and everything we talked about in this call today is what we've been pushing for since day one, which is inclusivity, males drinking Rosé, no seasonality, gastronomic pairings, all of that. So I'm really happy to see that, you know, as a region, Provence is thinking like that, because I really think the Champagne region has done a good job of owning who they are and crafting their message. And it's so refreshing to see that Provence has now said, you know, we're going to own our message as well, to really make Rosé this great wine and be taken serious as a wine, because for so long it was seen as this gimmicky, you know, white girl Rosé fun all day, like all these like catchphrases that, you know, made the wine seem like it was less than, and it's certainly not less than any other region at all. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. It's a really, really good wine.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm gonna hustle to try to buy some if it's still available.
Yeah, 2018 is gone. The 2019 will be here next week. So
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, it's delicious.
Before we run out of time, I'd love to, Tahira, do you want to talk just a little bit more? You mentioned the Roots Fund at the top of your intro, but I'd love for you just to talk a little bit more before we break here about the important work you're doing.
Yeah, so the Roots Fund is me and Carlton McCoy put together this fund, and it's really just to create pathways into the wine industry. I think that we a lot of times fall into the space of being indoctrinated that we can only be a som or a winemaker. And there are so many other paths into the wine industry, and there's so much other value that you can add. And particularly for the Black community, which is incredibly underrepresented. And we both come from low income neighborhoods. And so wine was not a part of our lives. You know, we both ended up being very successful, but that was a struggle. And that just kind of almost happened by chance. And it was because somebody else was in that place to help us. We want to be those people in that place. Like, so the Roots Fund is literally, you know, it's called the Roots because we're helping to launch careers. So what we're doing is we are providing financial assistance for, you know, if you want to take your tests, if you want to go to France to study, you know, harvest. We have partners in France, different wineries that take internships. Job placement is a very big part of our initiative because that's the other thing. It's like, it's one thing to create diversity and inclusion, but it's another thing to create equity. And when we're paying people for their knowledge and paying them their worth. And so we have partnered with a ton of wineries that are not only taking interns, but also guaranteed job placement, mentorship. And, you know, it's kind of funneling hand in hand with Hue Society. So, you know, the Hue Society community can go through these different levels, and then, you know, we will get the Roots Fund and place you where your heart desires and help you develop that trajectory, because it's not just, oh, I want to be a som, I need to take a test. Like CMS is, I think, is specific for a certain thing. Like, you want to take CMS, that's fine. We're not going to police how and what people want to do, but we want to make sure that we open up options and we make it accessible. That's the major thing, is access. And that's what's completely lacking in these communities, is the idea that you can be something else, you know, and here we're going to help you launch into that. So, you know, it's really our heart, because it's from a very passionate place for us. And, you know, we are just super excited about this, because this is how you create diversity from the ground up. You know, you put people into places and you make sure you give them the education, and we make sure that the spaces are safe, you know, and it's not just, oh, you know, I hired a Black or brown person and, you know, we're still going to traumatize them through their entire career. It's more so, this is going to be good for you. We're going to make sure that you're getting developed, and we're going to make sure if you want to be a CEO, you can be a CEO. If you want to own a wine shop, we're going to put you with somebody who owns a wine shop. You know, we're going to pay for your housing, because that's the other thing about access. You know, a lot of internships are unpaid. So they go to people who can afford to work unpaid. You know, a lot of us don't have that option. We have to work our way through school. I worked my way through college. So we looked at all of those things, and we really just said, we need to be the things that we needed coming through this industry. So that's what the Roots Fund is for. And obviously, like the grapevines, Roots.
Yeah, it all works.
Place.
That's incredible.
Tahira is the most important person in the wine industry right now. What are you guys doing? I mean, that's huge, but like, it's just, it's you know, I think, you know, the momentum from this moment is I think is really, yeah, it's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Everybody out there.
Thank you.
It's great.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us tonight, because I hope everyone here, you know, Rosé, it's one of those things that, like, you know, we said this is, there's so, I'll never forget the moment that, when all the restaurants shut down and everybody started talking about restaurants as being a place that employed all these people, right? And I was like, holy shit, like the restaurant industry isn't just like a fun place. It's not just like a thing, but it's where people make their livelihoods and they live. And the wine industry is the same sort of way. But to be able to provide, and within that, it's had so many faults within it too, but it has the opportunity to be able to provide a great life that ultimately all the people on the camera here today are lucky to live, but to be able to provide to show people that it's a good thing and you can live well through it is amazing. So,
and not have to struggle to get there is the key.
Exactly.
So if people want to find some more information, it's therootsfund.org.
Yes.
Look, with the Infatuation is going to be making a donation today, and I think Parcel will do something too. But just wanted to support and
thank you
for joining.
That's amazing.
Obviously, we want to help get the word out. So therootsfund.org. Share it wide. If you enjoy wine, it's super important, but it's just super important for the world right now too. And I think Donna might be stuck on mute, but we're good otherwise.
Oh no, I'm here. I was just pouring the glass. I didn't want you to hear the noise.
Okay, I want that noise. That's good.
I was on a Zoom call and somebody turned the faucet on next to me the other day, and I was like, "These people think I'm going to the bathroom on Zoom," but I was like, it's not a good situation. But
well, thank you guys. I'm gonna cheers to you for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Really, really appreciate it. This was great. Helped us a lot as we talked through all this stuff. And again, we're looking forward to doing more of these, and we'll have more great people from around the wide world joining us as we work through some more of them. So just so you all have a heads up, next week is going to be the one that we really focus on pairing rosé with food. So Tahira, we might have to phone a friend while we're going through that and get your point of view on it, since we touched on it today. But it'll be good. Like, that's going to be a great way for us to kind of wrap everything up, because obviously that's such a point of interest for everyone, and regardless of what kind of wines we talk about. So actually, Chef Ludo from Petit Trois is going to be joining us next week, which should be fun. And he'll help us certainly pronounce some of these appellations and producers the right way. So
I need some of that bone. I'm coming back.
That's right. You should.
Exactly. She knows what's up. I had to fight for that wine. It is a good one though.
Right. I remember those days. That's why I'm like, okay.
That was good.
For sure. But thank you guys again. Really, really great. And we appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon. And hopefully we'll see everybody next week. So thank you. And drink some rosé before the next time we see you.
Thank you guys so much.